Hi everyone, it's Monique from ButterBeeScraps. As you know from my last video, I am doing weekly tutorial blog posts every single Thursday over on my blog at ButterBeeScraps.com. This week though, I thought I would do it a little bit differently and we'd do the tutorial in video form. We could have some fun together. I also hinted in my blog post last week that we were going to get messy, and messy we are going to get. So what I'm going over this week is how to alter your metal filigree pieces using acrylic paints. So the basic materials you need are paintbrushes, and I just have a variety of different sizes, and they're just cheap paintbrushes. They don't have to have a very nice end on them. There's that. I've got acrylic paints. I've got a cup of water here because of course acrylic paint is water soluble. I also have some steel wool, some rags by my side here, and just a spray bottle for quick and easy cleanup. So what type of acrylic paint do you use? I use a variety. The first one that everyone could get at Walmart, it's the cheapest one, is this folk art paint. This one's okay in certain situations, but I do find it to be quite runny. I much prefer the Martha Stewart paint. I know it's more expensive, but you will use less. So is it really more expensive? Probably not. It's also really thick, so it's got really good coverage. I thought we could play a little bit with the Distress Crackle paint. And last, but certainly not least, I have some Lumiere paint here with me. So the number one most important thing to do is with your metal is surface preparation. And that goes with anything you paint, and it doesn't matter what you're painting with. Surface preparation is the most important step if you want the paint to last. So now you could just take your pieces and wash them just in like dish detergent, which will get rid of any kind of surface oils, because some of these filigrees, they may have a little bit of an oily feel to them. So you want to get rid of that. But if you really want your paint to stick really well, and for most applications, I would suggest you take a bit of steel wool and buff the surface first. This is super fine steel wool. And let me see. Actually, I'm going to do this leaf because there's a lot of surface area. So the first thing you do is buff with the steel wool. And I usually just kind of go in a bit of a circular motion, and I know I probably shouldn't be doing this on my mat, but I mean, it kind of dulls it a bit, but you really can't see the scratches, but trust me, they're there, and it makes a big difference. Now after that's done, this is where you would wash with your dish detergent. Another thing you can use is just rubbing alcohol or alcohol wipes. And I do have alcohol wipes, but they're across the room, so I'm going to do one of those, do as I say and not as I do. And I just sprayed this with a bit of water and wiped it off. So one of the first things you can do is just do a solid paint job. And this one I actually want to test with the Distress Crackle paint. I want to see what it does. Now this paint is so old and I've barely used it. Love how thick it is. So we're just gonna, I lifted the leaf so that I didn't get it all over my craft mat. Not like it matters, but anyways, we're just gonna blob it on there. And I will warn you guys, I have not worked with this Distress paint very much, so I don't even know how thick to put it on. I know if you put it on really super thin, you're gonna get like micro cracks and whatever. So anyway, I put a nice thick layer of paint on that sucker. So I'm just gonna set it aside to dry and hopefully not accidentally bump it, stuff like that. It's actually on there so thick you can't even see the texture in the leaf anymore. Another thing you can do is just use your standard acrylic paints. And I grabbed a black here again for reasons that will become clear later. And this is the Martha Stewart, and you can see how thick that is. And I like to just dab it on, because dabbing it on will do a few things. One, it will get into all those little crevices. And two, it won't leave brush strokes. Like if you were to brush, well, okay, I guess you can with Martha Stewart, but with the cheaper stuff like the folk art paint, if you were to use brush strokes, you would see those brush strokes. Not only that, but you would quite often see the metal kind of showing through the paint. I need just a touch more. My biggest thing when I do this is, I mean, I don't mind getting messy, but how do you hold the piece, because the edge that you're holding rubs the paint off. So I don't know if you saw what I did there. Basically, I'll try to hold it from one tiny corner and I'll dabble over, and then the very last thing I do is go back over that little section. And I'm just gonna set that guy aside there. Now another thing you can do is, rather than using a brush, just use your finger. And I would tend to choose the thicker paint. I'm actually going to take, this is Porcelain Doll from Martha Stewart. Sorry, I will try to stay in the frame. And this one I haven't used yet, so let me take the top off. This is kind of like a pinkish, whitish color. Like I thinned this out really thin. You can see it's really thin. I got a really thin bit on my finger. I'm going to go over the edges of the petals on the flower just to kind of shabify it a bit, if you want to. Almost like you would do this with Rub and Buff as well. So you got something like that. Another way you can apply it is to dry brush it onto your metal. So basically this paintbrush here has not been wet, and very, very little bit. You can see I'm using like this patch which is already started to dry, just a tiny bit. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm in frame there, but it's so subtle. But it does catch all those high spots. I don't know if you could see that. I will also put pictures, so it'll be easier to see, and maybe be easier to see if I hold it next to. So this one obviously has not been painted. This one's been dry brushed. I can see the difference. I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up, because honestly I can't really see the screen that well. Now another method, and I really like doing this, is if you're into like shabby chic type style, you will love this method. And actually I prefer to use this cheaper, thinner paint for this. This is just Ivory White, it's called. So I'm going to put a bit of that on my mat here. And what you do is you completely cover your piece. Just a thin coat. And literally wait like seconds. And then just take a cloth and wipe it off right away. And you saw how long I waited, like just a few seconds. And what that does, how beautiful is that? It just leaves a little bit of paint in the crevices. And you know what? If you're not happy with it and you want the paint to be a little bit darker, do a second coat. And it'll get darker every time. So here, let's try a second coat, see what happens. Again, super thin, but I'm getting into all those crevices. Literally, like, it's what, 5 seconds? And I'm gonna wipe it off. So, oops. Be careful not to pull his antenna off, though. You can see I wiped a little bit more on the right. But you know, paint is so forgiving, so really, really like how that works. You can see the difference. This was just with my finger, this was shabby. The nice thing about doing this is you can also try a different color. I'm going to do, what color? Well, roses are red, right? So I'm going to use this really, really pale pink color. It's called Ballet Slipper from Martha Stewart. And I don't think this one's opened either. Jeez, I got how many unopened paints? Now, this is a thicker paint, right? We're not using the full cart this time, so... And I'm just gonna use the same brush. Normally I wouldn't, but I'm just trying to wipe some of the excess white color off. How pretty is that? It actually almost looks white, so you might want to go with a darker color. Let's try, I have this Beach Glass from Martha Stewart, which is a much brighter, but I thought this would look like a really nice patina. So this is a much darker paint, obviously. Hopefully it'll work a bit better, or give me the effect I'm looking for anyway. And you guys, don't be afraid to mix paints if that's how you feel like doing it. You could do like the top, the flower in white, and do the bottom stem and leaves in this kind of turquoisey color for a patina look. How great does that look? Then of course you have to set it aside, set all these things aside to dry. Now, remember this here? How we just brushed it with our fingers? Well, you can see there's water still in it. Don't be afraid to do 2 different steps. Like this one here, we painted solid, and honestly it's not quite dry. So I'm going to give it a shot with the heat gun, and this actually would help heat set the paint as well. And now keep in mind, this is metal, and I just hit it with a heat gun, so what happens? Right, it gets very hot. So please be aware of that. Be very careful. It will heat up, but it'll also cool quickly. It's still just a bit tacky, but that's okay. We're moving on. So why not combine techniques? So what I'm going to do here is, this one obviously was painted solid, and I've got this Lumiere paint. The color is brass. And if you don't have Rub and Buff or don't like working with oil-based products, I guess you could use Inca Gold, which is a little friendlier, but you can also use paint. And I mean, I opened the paint, and I don't know why I wiped the top off, but there's still a little bit there. I'm going to do the same kind of thing I did here, but on this one. Oops. Just get a little bit on my finger and lightly brush it just to bring out the texture in it. You can do it as much or as little as you like. So one thing I kind of started over here before I started the video was, you guys know Julie the paper bag lady. She's a good friend of mine, and she has been on this quest to find something to turn non-bronze filigrees into bronze looking filigrees. And this filigree started off being silver. Let me put a silver so you can see the difference. What I did is I painted it with the Lumiere old brass paint, which, I mean, the color is pretty close to bronze, but it isn't quite there. So what I thought I would do is, and this is another example of mixing methods, I'm going to clean up some of this paint so that I can be in the camera frame. So I just dabbed on this old brass. And now what I'm going to do, because if you look, I mean, the crevices look darker, right? So I am going to take a little bit of this black acrylic paint. It is a Martha Stewart. Grab a clean brush, paint over it, and you guys, I'm totally experimenting. Haven't done this. And now, before that dries, hopefully we won't wipe off, and we are. The original coat of paint was not dry enough. Nasty. Actually, it looks kind of cool. Because the color's kind of smushed together, for lack of a better word. And you can still see some of the silver through, so it almost looks like it's aged and chipped and that kind of thing. Very cool. Anyway, you know what I'm going to do? I've got this bronze piece, right? Silver. So I am going to paint this piece with the old brass. And yeah, I'm using a teeny paintbrush because all my other ones are used and dirty. But what I'm going to do is we'll paint this, I'll put it aside, and I'm going to let it dry for a long time. Make sure, I might even heat set the paint. And then I'm going to do the same thing as what I just tried doing. Put the black over top and rub it off, just like we did with the patina and the butterfly. And I'll put a picture at the end of this video so you can see how it turned out. So I think that's about all the techniques I have to show you today. But there is one last thing that we should discuss, and that is when you're done painting your pieces, you should really finish them as well if you want your pieces to last and want the paint to last. There are different kinds of sprays. I have this Varathane spray. A lot of people use Krylon. I believe Krylon you can get from pretty much any hardware store or Walmart, and it comes in matte, satin, or gloss finish, so it depends on what kind of look you want. If I was spraying this, I'd probably use a matte finish. So there's sealer sprays. There's also, you can use glossy accents. Of course, that's going to give you a glossy finish. Diamond glaze would work. Multi-matte medium. Probably Mod Podge. I'd have to look at the label. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and I hope you have a lot of fun getting messy. Ciao.